Hello everyone, George DeSantis here with a look at the market for the week ending March 23rd, 2018. As usual, we'll put up the disclaimer before we continue, and I urge you to read the disclaimer and to note that this is not an attempt to give professional advice, investment advice, because I'm not a professional investment advisor. So let's start by looking at the weekly chart of the S&P 500, as we usually do. Recall that last week we had what appeared to be a triangle, an ABCD triangle developing here. However, last week's candle pulled this potential triangle all the way down to now look like this. Notice also, and I'm taking note of the fact also, that we are almost at this level here of this low, which would give us pretty much a double bottom. So we don't know this market, it's a weekly chart, and it's just turned very negative. So this market could go even further, but it looks like we have to hold at 2540, a support level of 2540, which would be this low here. If we don't, then there is much more pain, perhaps, to come. So what have I done? I have lightened up what I had in my portfolio very early in this downtrend here. So I sold off much of the big holdings in Apple and Facebook, etc. But I still have a few stocks and quite a few of the ETFs, which I'm not going to sell. They're core holdings in one of my accounts. So this is where I am. The target we calculated, this 3094 target, it still holds, but we have to get some signal of a bottom here before we could even think of a target on the upside, because we have the 4 EMA breaking below the 9, and the 9 is still above the 30, but that could easily change in this coming week. It all depends on what sort of follow through we get here this week. So it's very treacherous, let's put it that way. The RSI 12 broke below the 60% line here, and it has since remained pretty much below it. It's still above 40%, so there's a little bit of strength there. Williams percent R, not looking good. Broke below the 50% line, and you've heard me say I consider the 50% line sort of a line in the sand. If we're going to break below the 50% line, there could very well be more pain. Very well be more pain. MACD histogram is decidedly bearish now, and there is no divergence. There is no bullish divergence here. So it doesn't look good. And the formula that I wrote in Jerry Appel's sum of the rate of change indicator is below the 4% line. So expect some more pain. And what would save us is if this develops to be a double bottom. Can we hope a little? Let's hope that we see a double bottom. Now, let's face it, there are all kinds of ill winds concerning the politics, etc., and the interest rate increases, but I'm not an economist. I can't deal with that. I can just look at what the chart is seemingly telling me, and try to share that with you. Let's look at the daily chart. On the daily chart, we can see similarly here we have almost a double bottom. We're just about approaching that double bottom. 2540 would be a double bottom. We're at 2588. So the same things hold true here. We have on RSI 12, which we usually use on a weekly chart, but we can take a look at it here too. We broke below the 40% line. Not good. Williams percent R broke below the 50% line. Not good. MACD, of course, a little line of sunshine here, but let me point it out first. You see, bears were very strong here when we made this low. And the bulls try to rally the market up here. Might call this a false breakout. And now the bears are pulling us back down here. However, the bears are not as strong as they were over here. So let's hope that the bulls can recover some of their strength in this area here. Now, looking at the formula at the bottom of the chart, the summary rate of change, you could see it's clearly below 4%. So I'm not buying anything. I'm holding. I'm doing some day trading, which has been working out pretty well because we have some good volatility. But let's take a look at some individual stocks. We might start with one of our favorites, which is Apple. What I note here is that Apple is sort of a perfect reflection of the general market. We can see the chart looks so similar to the S&P. This is a weekly chart, and we can see that, well, it hit the upper Bollinger Band, the 2 standard deviation band, pulled back last week. This is the weekly, as we say. So we seem to be in a bit of a squeeze, and by the way, I didn't mention the squeeze on the S&P, but you remember a week ago we talked about that squeeze, and we said it could go either up or down, but we are likely to have a dramatic move, which is what you get when you get a squeeze, which is followed by a dramatic move. In the case of the movement of the S&P last week, it was certainly down. I was anticipating, of course, and was hoping it would be trending up, but it didn't. And we saw that the triangle broke down too. So here's Apple, and we have a big bearish bar, and we have some of these other indicators looking, breaking below the 50% line. This Williams percent R. The RSI 12 is still above 40%, so there's some encouragement there. And again, the bears were much stronger here on MACD as they are apparently so far in this area here. So let's take a look at another stock, which is Facebook. We all know what's happening there, and we can see it here. Very, very bad news. Facebook has been breaking down. It was in a trading range for quite a while, and last week it just got hit pretty significantly. Let's look at something else. Here's a weekly chart of Netflix. Now, it seems to me that Netflix has been holding up pretty well, considering the damage that this market has been experiencing in the last week or two. It's been holding up pretty well here. This is a weekly chart. We have the parabolic still below the current bars, and these indicators here, MACD looks pretty good. So Netflix looks encouraging. I don't own it right now, but I have owned it and will consider buying it back. Here's a weekly chart of Berkshire, BRKB. And, it looks very much like the S&P too. You can see that low here, and you can see that it's pretty much attempting to hit this low, perhaps marking a double bottom, as I discussed, relative to the S&P. So it's also reflecting that weakness of the rest of the market. Here's a stock that I bought a little while ago, and Adobe, and it's a weekly chart. To me, it seems to be holding up pretty well given the damage that's being done to the rest of the market. Last week, of course, it was down with everything else, but I still hold it. Parabolic is below the most recent bars, etc. And you can see MACD looks pretty decent here. The sum of the rate of change indicator is looking very, very well above the 4% line. So I have this one. I'm holding it for now. And here's another stock I own, and I still own it. I haven't sold. And what do we see here? Well, parabolic shifted to go below the most recent bar. This is a weekly chart. I'm showing weekly charts. And parabolic is now below the most recent bar. So that's encouraging for Visa. However, last week, like everything else, it went down like what, $2.99, I believe it is, or maybe more than that. Yes, $2.99, or 2.49%. So I still have Visa. Let's hope it doesn't go much further down. Here's MasterCard, weekly chart. Nice trend, very nice weekly trend up here. However, as again with everything else, MasterCard took a fall last week. Parabolic still below the most recent weekly bar here, and the other indicators look pretty strong. They look pretty good. RSI 12 is above the 60% line, and Williams percentile, the 30 period one, is also above the 50% line. So the payment systems, Visa and MasterCard, I'm still holding in there with the payment systems. Here's a weekly chart of that ETF of the IBD 50. After coming down here in February, taking this drawdown here in February, it rallied nicely, and it simply pulled back with the rest of the market here last week. But this is one that I still hold. I have a few of these ETFs that I still hold. And here's a chart of Align Technology, the dental plastic systems that they use for straightening teeth now instead of the metal braces, I own some calls on it, made some money with it, and now it seemed to be consolidating for the last few weeks here. I would keep a close eye on it now. The other indicators don't look too bad at all. RSI 12 is just below the 60% line, and we're above 50% here on Williams percentile. MACD is in bearish territory, but the sum of the rate of change indicator remains above 4%. So if this market starts to recover, I want to take a look at the line again. When it starts to recover, I should say, because it will. And here's a weekly chart of Costco. Now, you'll recall that I drew this triangle some time ago, and it shows up even more clearly on the daily. But I drew this triangle and I bought Costco somewhere in here, and it started to collapse, so I sold it. And it still doesn't look as though it's ready to make a comeback. But we're getting a squeeze here. So we don't know whether it's going to result in an upswing or downswing. Well, we know what happens with that because we saw what happened with the S&P last week. We thought it might go up, at least I did. But I also pointed out it could go either way when you have these swings, these squeezes rather. So Costco is still in some questionable territory here. And here's Microsoft. Now Microsoft has a very nice looking weekly chart, but with everything else, last week it pulled back. We still have the parabolic below the most recent bar, last week's bar. So market turns around, expect Microsoft to move with it, that's my opinion. And here's a weekly chart of Nvidia. Very nice move for the last 2 years or so. However, like with everything else, it pulled back last week. But this has been a tremendous stock in the last 2 years. We do have parabolic below last week's bar, and with any recovery, this thing is probably going to continue to rise. Most of the semiconductors, with everything else, pulled back last week as well. But you notice that some of the rate of change indicator is still above 4%. MACD broke down into bearish territory, but there's no divergence there, I think that's about it because we just have about a minute or so left. I hope everyone has had a nice weekend, and let's hope that the market begins to turn around from here. Have a successful week in the market.